Story 1. Captive in the Abandoned Mine, A Tale of Revenge. My name is Sofia Mendez, and I never thought my investigative skills would lead me to such a harrowing experience. It all began when I received an anonymous tip about a series of disappearances linked to an abandoned mine deep in the mountains. The mine, once a thriving hub of industry, had become a desolate place, shrouded in mystery and whispers of corruption. As I ventured into the heart of the mountains, the air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled in my bones. The entrance to the mine loomed before me like a gaping maw, swallowing all light and sound. Ignoring the warning signs, I descended into the darkness, my only guide a flickering flashlight. The tunnels twisted and turned, a labyrinth of forgotten memories and lost souls. It was then that I stumbled upon a makeshift prison deep within the bowels of the mine. Chains hung from the walls, and the stench of decay filled the air. And there, in the corner, sat a figure shrouded in shadows. As my light fell upon him, I recoiled in horror. It was Miguel Silva, a local activist who had gone missing months ago while investigating the mine's dark past. His eyes, once filled with fire and determination, were now hollow and empty. He whispered tales of corruption and greed, of a powerful entity pulling the strings from the shadows. I knew then that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The disappearances, the whispers, they were all connected to a web of deceit that stretched far beyond the mine's walls. And as I delved deeper into the darkness, I realized that I too had become ensnared in its grasp. Days turned into nights, and I lost all sense of time and reality. The walls seemed to close in around me, whispering secrets of the past and promises of revenge. I knew then that I had to escape, to bring the truth to light before it consumed me whole. With newfound determination, I confronted the shadows that lurked in the mine's depths. And as I faced the entity responsible for the disappearances, a sense of clarity washed over me. I was not alone in this fight. Miguel stood by my side, his eyes ablaze with righteous fury. Together, we unleashed a storm of retribution upon those who had sought to silence us. The walls of the mine trembled, and the shadows recoiled in fear. And as the dust settled, we emerged victorious, our souls scarred but unbroken. As I emerged from the mine, the sun's warm rays greeted me, a stark contrast to the darkness I had endured. And as I looked back one last time, I knew that justice had been served, and that the tale of revenge in the abandoned mine would echo through the mountains for years to come. Anonymous Spectator Story. Story 2. Retaliation at Whispering Pines Retreat. In the heart of the dense forest, where the trees whispered ancient secrets and the wind carried a chilling melody, stood the Whispering Pines Retreat. It was a place of solace for those seeking refuge from the chaos of the world, a haven nestled in the embrace of nature. But beneath its serene facade lurked a darkness that few dared to acknowledge. The retreat was led by a charismatic figure known as Reverend Jacobson, a man whose silver tongue could sway even the most skeptical of minds. He preached of enlightenment and salvation, drawing in lost souls with promises of inner peace and spiritual awakening. But behind closed doors, his true intentions were far more sinister. 3 guests had vanished without a trace from the cabins of Whispering Pines Retreat, their disappearances shrouded in mystery. The authorities were baffled, unable to find any evidence of foul play. But whispers began to spread among the remaining guests, tales of a secret ritual conducted by Reverend Jacobson under the cover of night. One cold December evening, As the snow fell softly outside, a sense of unease settled over the retreat. The remaining guests gathered in the main hall, their eyes darting nervously as Reverend Jacobson ascended the pulpit. His voice was low and hypnotic, weaving a web of manipulation that ensnared all who listened. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Shadows danced along the walls, and the air grew thick with an otherworldly presence. One by one, the guests began to succumb to a trance-like state, their minds clouded by Reverend Jacobson's insidious influence. In the depths of the night, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. The guests jolted awake, their hearts pounding with fear. They stumbled out into the snow-covered grounds, only to find a scene of horror unfolding before them. Reverend Jacobson stood at the edge of the forest, his eyes ablaze with madness. In his hands he held a gleaming knife, its blade stained with crimson. Before him lay the bodies of the 3 missing guests, their lifeless eyes staring up at the starlit sky. A wave of terror washed over the onlookers as they realized the truth behind the disappearances. Reverend Jacobson had orchestrated a twisted act of retaliation, sacrificing the innocent in the name of his dark beliefs. The retreat, once a sanctuary of peace, had become a nightmare of bloodshed and despair. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, the authorities arrived at Whispering Pines Retreat, only to find it deserted. Reverend Jacobson and the remaining guests had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers of the horrors that had transpired. And so, the Whispering Pines Retreat stood silent and empty, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurks within the human soul. Final Symbolico. Anonymous Spectator Story. Story 3. Mountain Madness Cruelty in the Rockies. I remember that day. I remember that day as if it were yesterday, the day when the mountains whispered their chilling secrets and the snow-covered trees seemed to hide sinister truths within their icy branches. It was a day like any other, or so I thought. As I ventured into the heart of the Rockies, seeking solace in the solitude of a remote cabin. The cabin stood alone, a solitary figure against the vast expanse of white, its windows frosted over and its door creaking ominously in the frigid wind. As I stepped inside, a shiver ran down my spine, and a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. The walls seemed to close in around me, suffocating me with their oppressive presence. I tried to shake off the feeling of claustrophobia that threatened to consume me, but the darkness of the cabin pressed down on me like a heavy weight. Shadows danced in the corners of the room, their movements erratic and unsettling. I lit a fire in the hearth, hoping to dispel the chill that had settled in my bones, but the flames cast eerie shadows on the walls, distorting reality in a macabre dance. As the night wore on, strange noises echoed through the cabin, the creaking of floorboards and the howling of the wind outside merging into a cacophony of terror. I felt as though I was being watched, unseen eyes boring into my very soul, stripping away my defenses and leaving me vulnerable to the unknown horrors that lurked in the darkness. And then, as the clock struck midnight, a figure materialized before me, its features obscured by the shadows that clung to its form like a shroud. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips, trapped in a prison of fear and disbelief. The figure beckoned to me, its hand outstretched in a silent plea for help, but I knew deep down that there was no escape from the nightmare that had enveloped me. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The walls of the cabin seemed to close in around me, their wooden embrace tightening with each passing moment. I was trapped, a prisoner of my own making, doomed to wander the halls of the cabin for eternity, a ghostly spectre haunting the mountains that had claimed me as their own. And as the first light of dawn crept through the windows, illuminating the cabin in an ethereal glow, I knew that my fate was sealed. I was but a memory now, a whisper in the wind, a victim of the mountain madness that lurked in the heart of the Rockies. Anonymous Spectator Story.